Hello, and welcome back to another exhilarating episode of Morganza. I'm Dale Morgan, and this is the third and final part of my conversation with Hollywood singer-songwriter Richard Goldman, the mastermind behind the vital 1997 release, Girls and Cows. If you haven't checked out part one yet, where Richard provides background on how the album came to be, or part two, where Richard gives us his commentary on the first half of the album and provides us with a new exclusive live acoustic performance of a song from the album, be sure to check those out. In this episode, we'll complete our walkthrough of the final tracks on the album, and be sure to stick around till the end, where we'll feature yet another new live exclusive performance of a song from the album. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoy the show. On TV in 1968.
Mary Tyler Moore looked great on TV in 1968. On TV in 1968. It might be before your time if you were born in 1969.
On TV in 1968, sang very little pop song, fun to sing, and came actually in a dream, not the whole song, but the title. I know where I was in my apartment, so it was like 87, 88. I had a dream where I had a hit song on the radio, and I could, and it was playing, and the title was On TV in 1968. That's the coolest title. And so I woke up and tried to write it, and did. And I think that's pretty much my story.
And as
it was the reason Richard Meyer, who was the guy that took this tapes of maybe 3 or 4 of them to this guy, or sent tapes to this from New York to Vermont. This was the one. That was the one he loved the most. Was On TV, and I had a very good home demo of it. And like I said, I mentioned to you once that I got. The thing that got added from demo to the Girls and Cows version is the bridge, which
another excellent bridge.
Any number of I have a number of songwriter friends growing up, and I tended to avoid. I was a lazy songwriter, and if it didn't come to me right away, I wouldn't really work on them too long. And if it didn't have a bridge, I would say, well, there's no river, so I didn't need a bridge. And, I had my line to get out of it, and that was it. And this song, I knew, had 3 really long verses and really needed a break. So in the rewrite of it and the re-recording of it for Girls and Cows, probably about, a decade after it was written, along came the bridge line was, it may be before your time if you were born in 1969 on TV in 1968.
Yeah, good. And so, of course, Mary Tyler Moore was not on TV in 1968. We should just point out.
And it turned out, and when I looked it up, it turned out that the Mary Tyler Moore show the Dick Van Dyke show went off, finished in 67. And the Mary Tyler Moore show starts, I believe, in 69 or 70. So she was, in fact, not on live TV in 1968.
So it's poetic license, though, right?
I think so. They weren't. Dick Van Dyke was being shown in rerun for sure.
Right.
So it wasn't as if she didn't exist on the two.
Right. Next is elevator music.
They make music, elevator music. It's not the kind of thing you wanna get too much of. Music, elevator music. It's not the kind of love that makes you not the kind of love that makes you cry.
My friend Deborah, who's from New Jersey, and didn't lose that part of her New York accent either. So that it's fun to hear that now. That's what I hear when I listen to it now. We sing beautifully together, but we do sound like two sort of, New Yorker-ish, with they make music elevator music.
Elevator. Yep.
Music. And it's we really lean on the elevator. You can hear that AH at the end of every time, and it comes up a lot in the song. And I don't know where that song came from or why I wrote it. The demo was fast and pop song, and what I did on Girls and Cows just completely changed it, and I had a blast doing that because when Elvis Costello, that was part of his recording career. He was as huge an influence for me as the Beatles were, and he happens, when I'm close to turning 30. But yeah, no, one of his amazing things is he would, any song of his could be undone and turned backwards, upside down, inside out. And he often had 2 or 3 recordings, side recordings that were, from live performances of ballads now played fast songs now played as ballads, and this and that. So he did that all the time. And I really felt like I could, just completely take a song, that was going, and go with it and pull it off. And so that's what I hear when I listen to elevator music from 30 years ago, because I know where that one started, and it was more or less storytelling when it started. And then on Girls and Cows, it becomes much more of this, Northern British folk song or something, Is that fair?
Yep, that's fair.
Okay.
All of her girlfriends are brain dead.
She crossed the street as if traveling through time. An Iranian guy almost fainted. Men only seem to have one thing in mind, and alas, all her girlfriends are brain dead. All of her girlfriends are brain dead.
Which has a great opening line.
Yes.
She looked like a girl with a lot on her mind, but that's where the parallel ended.
Thank you for remembering that.
I have it in front of me too.
Well, but that you like that, and I was trying to get there. I used to have my wife as that first line. See, when even back then, even 40 years ago, if you give me the first line, I can run the whole song. And same way with
right.
I need the first line of the verse, and then once I have the first line of the verse, I can sing this verse that takes about a minute and a half to get through. But anyway, yes. So the first line's always tricky.
So you didn't play this song that night at that bar, right?
No.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. 15 doesn't 15 sound like a lot of songs for a record?
It does. They're mostly short.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I was going. Still only
not a lot of
minutes long.
That's right. Not a lot of jamming going on.
No.
At the door.
The fire burns, the lights are low, but the pounding is disturbing. I thought I told him everything. He must not have heard me. I think he's there at the door. Think he's there at the door. Please don't open the door.
At the door.
No, you don't have to talk about it.
a weird dark song, yeah. And
Yeah.
I love the guitars. I love the feel of it. Again, that was it was an. I worked very hard at trying to catch the feel that I had from the demo in At the Door, my home demo of At the Door, because the guitar lines were just so eerie and cool, and I had so much fun playing them. So yeah, I redid that one, and the bass is really good on that. I don't sound like an old man playing it. It's kind of it's not as upfront, um, but yes, it was about a real moment in time in my life, and a strange one to hear 30 years later.
Next is Carnival Girl.
Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes nothing you say can change the way someone can love. Now she's gone, and you've gone insane for a carnival girl in a whole nother world. Carnival girl.
Carnival Girl is wonderful. I still play that now if I have, if somebody gets me to maybe a fifth song, Carnival Girl will come up because it's very easy to play. And it's just surprised, some songs, you hear them too often, and when you're working on it, and you burn out on it. And I burned out on Carnival Girl because it took me about 20 years, and maybe it was sitting at a friend's house singing it with my wife. And I went, this song is fucking great. And to realize just how simple and lovely that one, how Carnival Girl is, and it's got its own, it lives a sonic world that is different than most of my other songs, and there's a little homage to the Kinks in there with Now She's Gone, which is from I think a song called See My Friends in 1966. It's just a phrase in that song, but it's the same three notes with the same three harmonies Richard is singing. Goes on King's line thing, and it's just a line in the song that's exactly the same as a line in a King's song.
So was there a Carnival Girl?
Yes,
a girl.
Yes, there
was. Is this a girl who worked at the carnival, or who?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, she never made it to an actual carnival, but there was a Carnival Girl.
All right, number 14 is Wings.
If you got wings, you better use them. If you got wings, you better fly. I couldn't wait to see you, now I can't wait to say goodbye. If you got wings, if you got wings, if you got wings.
And Wings is that bass that we talked about, that sounds like, an old man is playing an eel of some kind, that's just, but I like it. I like the bass part, but that one, the bass comes up again. And it does really sound like a 70s bass. Sometimes you hear a song and go, oh, those drums, that they sound so dead. That must be 1973 or something, because just they don't have a certain kind of crack.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, that's a 1970s bass sound on Wings that I managed to make in 1997. But that the song is, again, the other thing
So
that comes up on this is Hank Williams. Sometimes, if you've ever sat down and listened to a Hank Williams album, it's
yeah,
like 10, no matter how many songs are on it, they're just like stories, and little things, and some of them just have the most endearing and simple melodies and this and that. And I would say that's like the goal of my song has been through most of my life, is to try to write a simple little thing with and Wings is, as close to it. I think I was working on trying to write a country-ish song for something. So I was, when I sing it, I naturally sort of develop a country accent as I'm getting into it or something. But again, I like there are some certain lines in that song that endear you to it, and I'm trying that. And I think dumb comes up, like I'm dumb, like the dumbest thing I've done. Yeah, where the the singer is saying, it's the last verse. Well, I made a few mistakes. You pointed out most everyone, but
right.
seeing you's turned out to be like the dumbest thing I've done. It's that like that really makes that phrase and the thing human. And even though it's like me doing like a fake country accent, it somehow you get into that person's head through that one like word.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. I like it a lot. So, is this the one that involved a neighbor of yours? Is that there was a story you told about a neighbor, like you were in a four up, you were like in a four up duplex or something, and then there was one
That's
girl.
Well, the song was written in the same location, but
Okay, okay,
it is not the
all
same.
right. I'm mixing up stories.
Yeah, no, and that was all of her girlfriends are brain dead. She
Oh,
slipped
that was Braindead. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, okay,
through the
okay.
cracks, and this was she was this lovely thing who was just ridiculously over dramatic.
Right, right,
We
right.
lived in West
Okay.
Hollywood. Half of West Hollywood was ridiculously over dramatic
Well, sure.
for varying reasons, but so she wasn't in the wrong place. It was just that I she wouldn't chat with the wife. She would chat with the husband of the guy across the hall, and tell me all these weird things about her life. Things like
Mhm.
how stupid her friends were, and then hence the all of her girlfriends are brain
There you
dead.
go. So,
And
yeah.
it was just someone who would always share too much information and was just like always like overly dramatic and things happen. And I tried to get that
Right.
across in the song with the aliens and this and that. That there was always something with her.
Got it. Good.
Mhm.
All right. Last and not least, if only for a moment.
If only for a moment, if only for a night, if we could just pretend, then everything would be alright. If only for a moment, if only for a night.
This is my favorite.
Not because it was at the end and that the album was over. No. Okay.
Oh,
No. Um, yeah, no, this was one of the two that got written for the record, and I believe it was very much a free write. In other words, kind of like, I'm just going to fill up this page and entertain myself and then see what
Wow.
happens.
Wow.
And so I'm writing a little, story to myself that isn't true about a girl from Barcelona who drove a guy like me insane. No, none of that was true. It's just me having fun for myself, and then the chorus just became so pretty.
Yeah,
If
it
only
is very pretty.
if only for a moment, if only, if we could just pretend, then everything would be all right. If only for a moment, if only for a moment. So it became, it slipped into this sweet little song, and then would again slip out of it with verses. With the last verse where a bird lands on his shoulder, he turns to the bird and somehow snaps its neck, and it becomes a Seinfeld episode. I mean, that should not be lost on anyone. That a lot of my songs in a certain era had Seinfeld things happening. And Seinfeld, basically nothing's going on until nothing turns into a giant calamity, and
Right.
and they have to figure out a way to get out of it. And that's what happens, and occasionally in my songs too. There's nothing going on until there's a calamity, until there's feathers are on the floor, and we've got a death.
That's so funny. I like the opening line.
Honestly, it's from the Seinfeld era. There's no question
That's really funny.
that where my sense of humor would go to Larry David's darkness too.
Right.
He inspired.
I also like the opening line. If I knew what I was saying, I'd really have something to say.
Honest,
Right,
that's the only honest line.
That's the album. So after this came out, you're probably going on world tours and things like that, right?
Yeah. Well, it was a small world tour, but it was a tour, and that was a thrill for me. It was, the best things that came from Girls and Cows. Well, there was pretty much every review was lovely, and I would, even if they spelled my name wrong, I would cry reading it just because I just didn't think it would happen. Okay.
Right.
It's not something I prepared for. And one of the things that I'd love to talk to you about is how the thing with my other music from the 70s is the wonderful thing about today is that, growing up as a songwriter as a kid, if I had written a song 3 weeks ago, it's old. Things seem to change. Forgetting my own thing of going, oh well, I'm wiser now. I know more about music, so yeah, my songs are going to get better. All this, I'm better. My taste is better. Everything's going to get better the more you do it. That's going to happen. But what we did not see, or any of the foreseeing, of being part of pop, even for an outside moment in my 20s, was that I knew that I would watch someone like Jim Croce, that, he's got 3 hits in a row that are kind of the same, and then they don't want that anymore. We've moved on. Jim Croce was last year. The worst thing you could say if you were in your 20s in LA, that, like I had a hit 2 years ago. If you did, they don't. So what are you doing now? It's just like, well, you had your moment. Pop music moved on, and now you, even though you're very talented, are part of. We'll in about 5 years we're going to have you at shows, and you'll be an oldies thing. So you didn't think what you were doing. It was like a Bic lighter. It was that disposable thing. You were creating and writing music that was disposable. And there was never even a dream that this 76-year-old version of me would be talking to you about or talking to anybody about songs that I did 30 years ago, because pop was ever changing and no one really, well, you would go to see oldies shows, but that they weren't considered where pop music was at the time. And so, I spent my whole life thinking music and my music was disposable, and I was entertaining myself for that moment in time. Well, it turns out I was creating a whole bunch of music that I could listen to in my old age, and then now I have 20-year-olds who contact me out of the blue, ask me the chords to certain clever chord songs from my 20s, and are like better musicians than me, as talented or more talented than me, and they're listening to my music from 50 years ago and loving it, finding songs that I didn't think were anything. There's a song of mine called "Do All Love Zen" that I wrote when I was 16, that a couple of three multi-instrumentalist kind of kids, drums, keyboard, guitars, which is just crazy to me. It's like, Otani is like a pitcher and a hitter at the same time. Someone who, a keyboard player in one band, a lead guitarist in another, and a drummer in yet a third band. Okay. So a lot of musicians now have these wonderful side gigs, play in 3 different bands. But I mean, to have someone talk to you about that and tell you that it's affected how my music from that era has affected their music. It is like a dream that I would never have ever dreamt, because
Right.
pop music was never one that looked back and or admitted that it was influencing future music. In other words, we could look back at Huey Piano Smith playing "Don't You Just Know It." And that's like my favorite song from the 50s. Okay, is Huey Piano Smith, "Don't You Just Know It." And you wouldn't, 10 years down the line, you wouldn't get Huey in a room and say, let's talk about that. It's like, you would acknowledge that it meant a lot to you, but it was gone now. And you wouldn't say, Huey, I saw what you did in that song. And I tried to use my hands the same way, and it just wasn't part of, acknowledging that the past was even part of pop, because everything had to be new and different and stuff. Anyway, that's what I didn't talk to you about, but I really wanted to share with you that aspect of the success of Sweethearts Deluxe, which you can find on your Spotify and other things from me, and is my music when I was in my 20s.
Okay, right. So there was no talk about doing a follow-up to Girls and Cows, though, immediately.
No, so I think I didn't really talk. I think I skipped the part about saying, okay, the good reviews led to NPR and All Things Considered asking me to write a couple of songs for just to lead into a story about a dairy farm, and I wrote a song called Cheese, and anyway, that was fun to do, and what that was, part of the good things that happened after Girls and Cows. But I was, in the middle of being a film writer, and so I went back to doing that and not doing a second record really. And it the level that folk music is on is that you can be known in the folk world and maybe make you can't make a living. It's really hard. And my friend Harvey that I mentioned, who did a cover of the Good Years, Harvey Reid, has successfully made a career of being a great folk musician. But you're not going to make zillions of dollars doing it. You can just make enough to be for it to be the thing you did with your life. And he is one of the best blues guitarists I've ever heard. He plays what are they called? The John Sebastian used to auto harp. He is like a ridiculously great auto harp player too.
Huh.
So it's hard to make money in any way, shape, or form, and it just takes time, and you have to be really, really dedicated. So I could have done a second record and made a little dent and made a little bit of, but I wasn't gonna, through making another record for Gadfly, that wasn't going to.
Yeah.
Change.
Well, like you said, you had one kid and another on the way, right?
Yes.
At the time, so it wasn't the best thing either.
Yeah,
really, to pursue
but
a life on the road.
But trust me, it was fun to have even a 3-week little tour of, and to be able like this to sit down and talk about my music as if this whole thing was real and like I was a real singer-songwriter, and as opposed to this fantasy that I'd been carrying on since age 14.
But were you even performing at this time? Or, I mean, you said you were doing screenwriting. Were you actually doing any performing?
No, not really.
Yeah, see, you kind of...
Yeah, once or twice every other year, I would do a show at some coffee house. And,
So this just kind of fell in your lap, and you said, "Sure, let's do it." Mm-hmm. Cool, that's really nice. Well, it's clear you had a good time doing it, and I'm really glad you did.
It's just crazy to have fans, and to have fans who are in their 20s and that listen to the Dancers, this beautiful ballad from '75, and how songs could have meaning for people, deep meaning for people 50 years later, such that I'm almost treated like Dylan. I'm almost treated like this, some. It's not Dylan. What was the Franny and Zoe guy?
Salinger.
Yeah, I had a female fan who was in her mid-20s who kind of treated me like Salinger, and just wanted to chat with me about things and wanted my take on this and that in her life, and she was great, and we're still friends. We don't talk as much. She got married in the interim, and so she got married and a baby, so her hands are full, and her life has moved on in some way from contacting songwriters and. But those things are the things that, again, not expected because pop was not supposed to care 50 years down the line about. I didn't. When I was, I didn't care so much what Fats Waller was doing. I would grow up to care, but he was 50 years shy of when I was, making pop music. And so he's in the 20s, and I wasn't at all listening to any of that. So that's why, and I don't think I would have, as much as by the time I'm in my mid-20s, I'm writing 20s type songs, but I didn't really listen to them too much. I was just aware of Rudy Valley and aware of certain parts of pop. Then my wife, who I would meet in the 80s, was a huge fan and still is of 20s, 30s jazz stuff. So,
Yeah.
but growing up, no, everything was the moment. And that's why, to me, it's just so amazing now that kids can get emotionally involved with stuff from 50 years ago. And
Well, is it because the stuff is because everything stays around forever? Because it's more accessible?
mhm.
Is that part of what's happening?
Well, that is part of what's happening, but it's that they have the ability to cherish the
Hmm.
music from that era.
Mhm.
Now, I've also been part of a world, that was just sort of the opposite in films. In LA, our kids were like, by the 90s and stuff. That's not in black and white, is it? Oh, that's too bad.
Right,
And it's
right,
like, because they wouldn't watch a black and white movie.
right. Yep.
And by the time they get to be about 20, the same kids who wouldn't watch the black and white movie in their early teens because it wasn't hip, and what do I want? What do I care about a movie star from 60 years ago? By the time they get into their early 20s, they start discovering. And that happened to me too. I mean, didn't think old time stuff was all that interesting, yet I fell in love with Chaplin and the Marx Brothers when I was, beyond the point that I would have, necessarily, it was amazing to be able to be old enough to appreciate, you know, what was going on, as opposed to always having to have the thing you love define who you are, and thus it has to be modern. And most
Mhm.
people don't like to define themselves. My wife was different. She always defined herself as someone who liked music that you've never heard of, which is, like the Boswell sisters from the 20s.
All right. Good. Thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Love the album, and best of luck to you in all that you do.
Well, thank you so much, Dale. And this has been a lot of fun doing it and talking about this record. And thank you for doing
And
this.
being the 30th anniversary, I hope that you will pursue the Super Deluxe Box Set version
I hope
of
so too.
Girls and Cows. So, I know Gadfly's still around, and so you need to start talking it up.
The 30-year deluxe anniversary deck with bonus tracks.
Bonus track.
Mm-hmm.
God knows you've got a lot of those, right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
Right.
and then there'd be the other Carnival Girl.
Put together a track list for the record label guys, and maybe they'll you kind of get the ball rolling there.
All right.
All right. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for this.
And now, as promised, here's Richard Goldman with an all-new exclusive live performance of If Only for a Moment.
1, 2, 3. If I knew what I was saying, I'd really have something to say. If I sang the things no one ever sings, I'd be a bigger deal today. As it is, I have a contract. Well, that's not exactly true. See, the deal is such I can't say too much, or the whole thing might fall through. If only for a moment, if only for a night, if we could just pretend and everything be alright. If only for a moment, if only for a night. waiting for the chorus. Things could not be worse. You're really out of luck and like completely stuck in the middle of a verse about a girl from Barcelona who drove a guy like me insane. There's not a lot to say. I think she's gone away. I think she went back home to Spain. If only for a moment, if only for a night, if we could just pretend, then everything would be alright. If only for a moment, if only for a night. A little birdie whispered something right into my ear. But when I turned to check, I sort of snapped its neck, so I did not get to hear. I had a shoulder full of feathers, a dead bird on the floor, and a Spanish flame with a Spanish name who once called me Senor. If only for a moment, if only for a night, then we could just pretend everything will be alright. If only for a moment, if only for a night. Thank you very much.
That's all for this time. Be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons, and we'd love it if you'd leave us a comment and let us know what you think. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Morganza.